This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Thursday time once again for your favorite segment and mine, Thursday Coast, with the founder of the largest online progressive community and the founder of Civics with a Q and the host of the ever popular podcast, The Brief, Marcos Melitzis. Hey, buddy, how are you this week?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to talk to you, as always. So you've had a chance to take an even closer look at what might happen in November, correct?
Yeah. At least we're starting to get some idea of the contours of what that election is going to look like. Now, historically, if you've been watching the show, you've been hearing us talk. We've said lots of times how in a midterm election, the party in power in the White House historically loses a lot of seats. It's just what it happens. Our system's broken. It's not designed to allow anything real to happen. So what happens is a new president gets elected, and the supporters of that president feel demoralized because nothing's happening. You know, Obama took 18 months to pass the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden never got his Build Back Better bill passed, right? So people get demoralized. Right. And the supporters of the other party feel disenfranchised, and that's very motivating. It's motivating to be out of power. And so that's why you had the Tea Party under Obama, you had the resistance under Donald Trump, and you have this QAnon, whatever they are, you know, the insurrectionists under Joe Biden. So those are the general dynamics in any midterm election. So in a normal year, we'd be looking at historic Democratic losses in Congress, losing both chambers, blah, 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 right? That's the norm. It's clear that this is not a normal year. Now, I've been hinting at it for the last year, not out of wishful thinking, but just sort of looking ahead, right? We knew that the Supreme Court was going to toss Roe v. Wade, and that was going to have cataclysmic effects politically. We knew that Donald Trump was not going to exit the political scene. And it's hard to have a referendum on an incumbent president in a midterm election if the old guy is not, you know, if he's still campaigning as though it's the presidency, right? We knew the January 6th commission was going to be doing stuff, right? So we knew things were coming that might have an impact, but it was all very theoretical at the time, Mark. You know, I was just thinking like, this is not a normal, we don't think it's going to be a normal midterm election. Well, it's less theoretical now because the Supreme Court has gotten rid of Roe v. Wade. Donald Trump is running for president. I guess he didn't announce it. Monday night in DC, but he all but said, I'm running for president, right? And the January 6th commission has had a more dramatic political impact than I think maybe anybody really foresaw. Particularly since we don't expect much from Democrats. I think there's a lot of credit to go to Liz Cheney, as much as it pains us to say that, right? I mean, she gave that committee some teeth, some fangs. I mean, so those factors are suddenly at play. And so what does that mean? It means that Donald Trump is running for president. He's taking fundraising and he's taking attention away from Republicans running for House and Senate. He's making it about himself, which mobilizes our base. Their base, remember, Republicans turn out. They don't need to be motivated to turn out. It is a Democratic base that is difficult to turn out. So Donald Trump's doing a good job of getting our people riled up. Obviously, Roe v. Wade just completely changed the equation. And the reality is that abortion rights are extremely popular, overwhelmingly popular in this country. The idea of restricting those rights is incredibly unpopular. I mean, the idea of criminalizing doctors who perform abortions, only 20% of Americans actually agree with that. And that's exactly what's happening in Indiana with this doctor that performed an abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim. So those stories are not going away. We're hearing a story in Texas. We just heard a story about a couple that was trying IFV. They're trying to have a baby through in vitro fertilization. And the woman had 2 or 3 miscarriages in this process. They're having a really hard time having a baby. The first two times, they had no problem getting a DNC, right? When you pull out the dead fetus. This time, though, hospitals refused to treat her. She was sitting in a bathtub bleeding for 2 weeks because hospitals were afraid to perform this procedure, right? So these stories are getting out. People are outraged, particularly suburban college-educated white women. We always talk about suburban college-educated white women because they are the only swing demographic. And if you ask them about abortion, it's not even close. If you ask them about insurrection, it's not even close, right? So, and they vote. They're an important swing vote because they actually vote. So we have that factor. Now we're starting to see polling that shows Democratic generic congressional ballot. This is, you ask everybody, obviously you're not going to pull 435 districts, right? So you ask everybody, who are you going to vote for? And Republicans, in the aggregate, you look at all the polls, you don't cherry pick the ones you like, the ones you don't like. In the aggregate, it was about Republicans, even to +1 Republicans over the last year. Since the Dobbs decision at the Supreme Court that invalidated Roe v. Wade, we've seen an average about 3 to 4 points in the Democrats' direction, and that number is still moving. It still hasn't bottomed out. We had a poll yesterday that it was Democrats +6. So again, I don't want to cherry pick. We're not going to cherry, but the trends are moving definitely in that direction. We're seeing the same thing in civics polling as well. Ironically, Joe Biden's numbers absolutely suck. Joe Biden, but he has almost become a non-story because Donald Trump, abortion, and the January 6th Commission had become so loud that Joe Biden, indecisive about $10,000 in student loans, is almost sort of lost. It's become less important than these major threats to both our democracy and our core rights that are starting to define this race. So we just had Republicans in Congress vote nearly en masse against contraception, against the right to contraception, to the point where even Republicans are going like, wait a second. And we you can go into conservative forums on Reddit, on Twitter, going like, all right, one guy was funny. He's like, yeah, I know that, Nancy Pelosi is evil and she's trying to screw us, but I read through this bill and I don't see the problem with it. So, you're starting to get inklings in our brain that wait a second, these Republicans are doing things that maybe we don't quite agree with. So that's the shaping, the contours. Right now, I would say that the Democrats pick up seats in the Senate, shockingly, and we may lose the House by a handful if the election was today. They were saying 30, 35 seat loss, Democratic losses. I would say right now, maybe we lose 5 because that generic ballot, Democrats may be +4 on a generic ballot, but because of gerrymandering, it means that the generic ballot needs to be at around +6 for Democrats to hold that even. This is not a democracy in any sense that you might think is logical. The Senate is not democratic. The House is not democratic. So we have some headwinds aside from history and aside from Joe Biden's unpopularity. We have some headwinds that we need to deal with, but we are in the game and the trends are moving in our direction. And I really still don't think that the Dobbs decision, the abortion decision, has fully sunk in to the mass electorate. That's going to be part of this debate. I think the contraception votes, there's going to be a gay marriage vote. And this gay marriage vote in the Senate is already passed in the House. It's going to be freaking fantastic, right? Because we're probably going to get 10 votes to pass it. So we will codify in law, we'll make it Supreme Court proof, or at least Clarence Thomas proof, to invalidate gay marriage. But so the majority of Republicans are going to vote against it, including Republicans running in the Senate in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, and people like obviously you look at Georgia with Herschel Walker. You're going to get the Republicans that are running that are not in Congress right now are still going to have to come out and say, yeah, we're against this stuff. So it's almost the best of all worlds, politically useful and policy-wise, because it's probably going to pass. There's already on the record, there's 5 or 6 Republicans that said they're going to vote for it. There's a whole bunch of them that are being all wishy-washy. The votes will probably be there. And if they're not, it's just more ammunition to use against Republicans, generally speaking. So this has ironically become a culture war election. And for the first time, it doesn't benefit Republicans, right? I mean, are they talking about stupid caravans from Honduras? Are they talking about critical race theory? No, they're on their back heels. They're being defensive. They're being forced to defend Trump. Any Republican sticks its neck out. The first question is, do you support Donald Trump running for president again? And they all get all, if he wants to, it's his right. They can't even provide a safe, clear answer. They are stuck on the gay marriage vote. I mean, we saw Marco Rubio say when he was asked about it, with Tammy Baldwin in the elevator with her, and Tammy Baldwin's a Democratic senator from Wisconsin. She's gay. She's the first openly gay, openly lesbian senator, might be openly gay, period. He was asked about gay marriage, and he said that I forgot the exact words, but it's like it doesn't matter. It's an unnecessary messaging vote. And I know lots of gay people in Florida, and they're worried about gas prices. I mean, that was his answer. So that right there is what's left of the Republican message right now. Gas prices are coming down. Doesn't mean they can go back up, but every time that price drops, another 20, 30 cents, it sort of takes a bunch of steam out of it. Inflation. I mean, these are real issues. I mean, let's not pretend that people aren't concerned about inflation and gas prices, but ultimately this election is going to hinge around abortion. It's going to hinge around gay marriage. It's going to hinge around Donald Trump. And those help us with the one swing constituency, suburban white college-educated white women, and it gets our vote out, which is why I don't know why Biden's still diddling with $10,000 in student debt relief, right? Like, I mean, political malpractice. But we are in a place where if our vote turns out and theirs is even slightly depressed, and there's a lot of infighting, that DeSantis, the Trump, they're all fighting each other already. Even the slightest drop off, we may actually get out of this election, not just with our majorities, but with bigger majorities. And that's still a stretch right now. I'm not predicting that we win the House, but I am saying that today we probably win the Senate, and we're close to being break even in the House.
Okay, so first of all, on the marriage equality vote in the Senate, you think there are enough votes for cloture to break a filibuster, to break the 60?
Yeah, I mean, we're at least 5, I think it might even be 6 Republicans that are already for it. And there's enough people who have been sort of wishy-washy on it that I think the vote's there. And I'm talking people like what's that dumb guy in Alabama, the guy who beat
Tuberville.
Yeah, Tuberville, who may be the dumbest human being in the Senate. Like he is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I don't care what people do. Why would we care? I mean, so if people like him that are sort of like the core, and he could be strong-armed into voting against it, right? He's not a very bright person, but it seems very clear that there's not a lot of appetite to vote against marriage equality with a fairly large swath of Republicans. And particularly, I mean, even Mitch McConnell has been wishy-washy on it. I mean, they don't want the vote because I think McConnell knows that it puts a lot of his candidates in a tough place. But are they also going to mortgage, further support with suburban voters by opposing something that is supported by, at this point, it's about 70% of Americans? I mean, how many votes on the fringe can they handle? And maybe contraception's too, maybe it's either too confusing for people to understand or so mind-blowingly idiotic that they just can't believe it's real. Republicans didn't just vote to take away my right to contraception. Like, I don't think people believe that it's so wacko. You know what I'm saying?
And I guess too,
gay marriages, they can get that. Gay marriage is understandable.
Yeah. And I think some people probably are confuse contraception. I mean, sometimes that term is used interchangeably with abortion, unfortunately. But what's interesting about it is, just as I've said this before, folks, for those who don't know, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Most men support contraception. All right. I mean, that's just now.
The reasons are pretty obvious.
Yeah, even Republican men who would vote for it, contraception has not been a bad thing at all. So there's that. So that's good if that's going to go through, and that will be codified. But it says a lot that people would vote against contraception, and hopefully that will be a mobilizing agent. Biden's numbers, though, is he purposely, or is it just in his best interest to just lay low for now?
I mean, at this point, yeah, hide. I mean, I don't know if he realizes that. I don't think he realizes just how unpopular he is, and I think he's just out of touch. And you know, I've never been shy about talking about Joe Biden's age.
Right.
He put out a statement against something or other, and it started with "call me old-fashioned," but it's like that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Nobody wants somebody who's old-fashioned.
Literally.
I mean, why are you calling attention to the fact that you're clearly, I mean, you're student debt. He promised this in his campaign,
right.
and they're all.
Right.
They're all. So the latest on that, by the way, is I saw a theory that says that Biden's decided on $10,000, but he's worried that if he does $10,000, that the NAACP and other groups will bash him. Great, make it 20. The end. Like, I don't understand. Or just get rid of interest. Make it a from now on clear interest. Make it a interest.
Right.
That alone may save more money than
right.
10,000 or 20,000, because the problem with student loans is a predatory interest rate. And you take that away, then nobody can be like, oh, well, somebody's getting a free ride. No, they're paying back what they borrowed.
Right.
You can make an argument about interest if you want, but I don't think it'll get very far with people. People are paying back exactly what they borrowed.
Right.
And so you see it in that. You see it in this obsession with talking about bipartisanship. Nobody gives a darn about bipartisanship. It's not a winning argument. It does not move the numbers. His numbers are going down by the day. Just objectively, I keep talking about bipartisanship, yet why do I become more unpopular? Because maybe nobody gives a darn. Republicans ain't going to give you credit. Democrats ain't going to give you credit. And independents think it's all BS.
Yeah.
Even if it was true, they don't believe it because they're so cynical and nihilistic.
I wonder if he's getting advice from Obama, because remember, that was Obama's thing.
Oh.
But I mean, when we get why he had to do that, he could never appear to be the angry black man, but a lot of us, I mean, you remember we had white callers call us and say, I need the angry black man.
Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump was the angry white guy. That seemed to be, I mean,
right.
To be fair, he lost. So maybe there's something to being the angry guy that's actually not good. But yeah, your point totally stands.
You cannot be the angry Joe Biden. Both things are possible. To be a non-angry Joe Biden and not to run around talking about bipartisanship, which isn't real, which isn't working. And frankly, the voting age public is, even young people are intelligent enough to see that your real problem is Joe Manchin. You can't talk about bipartisanship with another party.
You can't even get your own party.
Yes. Right. And frankly, a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people criticize Biden for Manchin's behavior because they feel like, wait a minute, you're the president. we elected you to do something about this. Why can't you make Joe Manchin do what he's supposed to do? That's when I look on social media, that's what people say. And I get it, that's naive, but that's still more than the two of us. There's a large number of people who believe that even what Manchin is doing or not doing, Joe Biden bears some responsibility for. So they got to get that together.
Yeah, but that's always the problem with the filibuster in the Senate, right? It's that people, right. I mean, it's been polled. I'm not making this up, right? It's been polled. The vast majority of Americans don't understand the filibuster. I mean, I'm talking like 70%. And when you explain it to them, I think Pew did a whole thing on this. They don't believe it because it makes no sense, right? So people look and go, well, Democrats have control of the Senate. Why doesn't stuff pass? And it's because you can argue, it's a filibuster, it's Joe Manchin. People don't want, like, you're making excuses. Democrats control the Senate. Why can't stuff pass? Mm-hmm. And then the thing is, when Republicans take control of the Senate, same crap happens, right? I mean, it's this, the chamber is designed to be broken. It's designed for the opposing party to retake it 2 years, 4 years later, because the argument is easy. It's a do nothing Senate. Nothing ever happens. We'll be different. And no, they won't. As long as the filibuster exists, it won't be any different. So it's not, it's just not an argument that flies politically, which is why that Clarence Thomas and Donald Trump are gifting us. They're gifting us this election, making it competitive. Right. I mean, we haven't won anything, but this should not be a competitive election because the way inflation, gas prices, Joe Biden's unpopularity, that should conspire to absolutely pummel the crap out of the Democratic caucus. Suddenly, or somehow we're in the game because, like I said, the party out of power feels energized. Well, are we really the party in power right now if the Supreme Court can come in and take away rights? Now, the Supreme Court is the party in power.
That's right. That's right.
So that is mobilizing, motivating our base in a way that I haven't seen ever. And, like the Obama years were painful. All it was tough to get people excited in the Obama years. And so this is a rare opportunity, would not exist without Clarence Thomas and Donald Trump. They're gifting us this right now. And so it's incredibly important that we take advantage of this opportunity and that we work our butts off to get people to turn out and participate and vote. Because we've talked about it. The difference between winning and losing is the difference between having a more representative democracy and probably fascism. I mean, Donald Trump's Monday speech was fascist. It was a police state. I mean, this is not exaggerating. He is calling for a police state, rounding up the homeless, taking control of National Guard from the states, death penalty for anybody with drug offenses. I mean, this is the stuff of it's a dystopian nightmare, what he's calling for. And for sure, the end of democracy. I mean, he clearly isn't. He has no. And the opposite is we win. We hold the House. We get 2 seats in the Senate so we can get rid of the filibuster. We can have statehood for DC. Probably statehood for Puerto Rico. Suddenly you get 4 Democratic seats. The Senate is still undemocratic, a little less so.
Right.
You're talking about passing voter rights. You're talking about we've talked about all the pieces. I mean, beside like things like Build Back Better and whatnot, we're talking about protecting core rights. We can make abortion legal in all 50 states again. The Supreme Court didn't say that abortion was unconstitutional. It said, it said it's up to the states to decide whether Constitution. It's up to the legislatures to decide. And even Alito said, women say that this is anti-woman. Well, women can vote. Like he said, right? I mean, he literally wrote it. Like, if you don't like this, vote. So we can get rid of this freaking Dobbs decision overnight by winning the Senate and passing a national right to abortion law. These are all things that are possible. Now, Mark, have you heard Joe Biden talk about this?
No.
Have you?
Quiet.
Have you heard Kamala? Have you heard the Democrats making that case? I've heard Elizabeth Warren make that case. I've heard Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez make that case. There's been...
Well, in fairness, the vice president made that case the last week of the NAACP convention. She talked about the importance of state elections because that is where the fight is when it comes to Roe. She did say that. I was there for that.
But if we hold the Senate, we can actually take it away from the states and we can pass it.
Oh, yeah, right. They can do it in the House right there, right. No, if we hold the Senate, yeah. But, you know, just like the Obama White House. Remember, the Obama White House killed the midterms. They announced early on, we're going to lose.
Yep.
I mean, it was just demoralizing. You and I talked about that ad nauseum. The consultant class that runs these White Houses does not like to say anything about potentially winning anything during the midterms. They just write it off. They don't know what you've been saying, and I've been sharing what you've been saying all over about how a lot of party and power midterm losses have to do with perception, even party and power. The Democrats are not the party in power. Yeah. The Supreme Court is the party in power. Now, here's the problem though, Marcos. I don't think you'll ever get a White House to admit it's not in power. Biden is not going to come out and say, hey, I'm the president, but I don't really have any power.
Joe Biden literally said, I don't, they asked him about the Supreme Court. He said, I'm not going to attack the Supreme Court because I don't want it to lose its credibility as an institution. He thinks they have credibility as an institution. That's the problem with having somebody who entire life was DC. I'm not a big populist, the swamp and the politics. But that's what people are talking about when they say that there's been somebody who's been there too long. He still thinks the Supreme Court has credibility. How does he think? How does that process in his brain?
He's thinking about those Supreme Courts of the 1800s that he witnessed when he was.
You said that, not me this time. But you see the problem, right?
That's romanticism. That's kind of like what he says. And I get what he's trying to do when he says, when stuff happens, he has this phrase, this is not who we are. Joe, this is what's going on in this country.
It is who we are until we prove otherwise.
And I wonder, who is the audience he's talking to? He clearly is talking to an audience that I guess is in denial, or some audience from a bygone era. But even with that now, if you really want to get into the age piece, Joe, age, one of the advantages of his age is that he's old enough to remember how bad things were before the Civil Rights Movement, before the Voting Rights Act. So that stuff isn't foreign to him. So when he says this is not who we are, Joe, what you're really saying is you're denying that this is what America was. That's what it always tends to go back to unless we're vigilant about it. It falls back. I mean, it goes forward and it falls. It may not fall back as much every time. But that is who this country is. And like, Reverend Barber always talks about, we talk about it all the time together. We may be looking at a third or fourth Reconstruction, right? And that was before Roe. We were talking about the possibility of a third or fourth Reconstruction taking place, and not even something that's organized, just organically. That's what happens. It happens again, quite possibly just on the issue of Roe alone. Mm-hmm. So, Joe, but I was talking to somebody. People call me offline and on the show. What's going on? Why is things so bad? Why is the White House acting this way? And as I think I've said on the show and said to you before, my confidential sources say that it is the staff, it is Ron Klain, even more so than Biden and his age, that do not know what they're doing. One very high-ranking congressional leader confided in me that they even have reason to believe that there's some on the White House staff who are sabotaging Joe Biden.
Feels that way, right?
Yeah, and so, it's something has to happen, and then the Black electorate is feeling more disaffected. There's this new legislation he's talking about, putting more cops on the street, and people, why would you do that? So it's so bad. As of Wednesday night, He puts his legislation out there. The Congressional Black Caucus had an emergency meeting and said, we're not going to allow that legislation to come to the floor.
Yeah.
We've not gotten accountability for bad policing. And now you're talking about putting more cops on the streets because he's listening to the crime. Oh, people are concerned about crime. We have people who are concerned about crime, but police haven't been solving crimes anyway.
No.
When you ask the police, you had a crime committed, how many times have you called them and they solve that crime? They don't. What they do is beat people up and kill them.
But just when you think about the political ramifications, I forget how many cops he's talking about adding, and it's 100,000.
100,000, yeah.
Yeah, dues paying cops to the police unions that are going to use that money to run against him. I mean, it's like Republicans saying,
right.
You know what, we're gonna 100,000 new trial attorneys, 100,000 new labor leaders. I mean, even from a practical self-preservation standpoint, why are you funding what's Border Patrol Union? I mean, why send some more money to the big oil so that then they can run ads against you? They can fund candidates against you. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And you look at his numbers, it's not helping. It's not like, oh, he got a bump from that. No, because they hear all the defund stuff and that's hurting us. And I'm not gonna, there may be places where that's true. I actually don't know. But broadly speaking, this is not what this election's about. It's not about defund the police. It's not about critical race theory. It's not about caravans. We've talked about it. It's about abortions. It's about contraception.
Right.
It's about January 6th insurrection. It's about Donald Trump and his party and his brand of fascism taking over the Republican Party. That's what this lean on that. Why are you going to suddenly try to address something that's next? Oh no, let's do an anti-CRT bill too, because like he's still in another world, or his staff is in another world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, Republicans lean into their advantages. And it might be, in years past, it was Honduran caravans. It was stupid, had nothing to do with what people really cared about, but they made it their thing. And they used it to gin up support with their core base.
Right.
Why are they trying to respond to Republican base that's never going to give him credit?
Never.
Now, the Democratic base, now the one place is there support for the idea that college-educated suburban white women care about the fund? Maybe. I don't trust white women.
but wait though, Marcos. Do they care about rising crime or defund? Because people don't say defund anymore. That's not even, that term is not really discussed anymore. So if they're still even tripping off that, they're in the past. The thing people are concerned about in terms of cops today is crime. Crime is going up. But even a reasonable person can see, well, that makes sense. We just got out of a pandemic. There's inflation. People aren't able to come back to. I mean, there are a lot of factors. I mean, you don't even have to be an economist or a criminologist or a sociologist to say, crime probably is going to go up a little bit in the midst of everything that's going on. So I don't even think nobody's saying defund anymore.
No,
but Joe Biden, he's saying I'm not for defund. I'm for. Who's still saying defund, Joe? You're late. You're slow. You're back.
Yeah. And right now they're concerned about their rights being taken away.
Right.
The one thing that Joe said, right, to Trump, he said, you can't be pro-cop and pro-insurrection. Stick to that. You don't need to send more money to police.
Right.
Undermine the Republican pretend support for police, which is only when it's politically expedient to do so.
Yeah.
It's just the same as our soldiers, right? I mean, they're pro-military, but they cut their education benefits. These are talk about that.
Right.
That doesn't mean send them, 100,000 new. No, they don't need 100,000 new cops. Come on. And especially, we have material to work with. You don't need to respond to their. You don't have to respond to their attacks. Focus on your core message and pound the crap out of it. It's a good one. For once, we have a good one.
And whoever's running the January 6th committee needs to run the White House. Maybe that's Liz Cheney.
Wait, that's Liz Cheney.
Because they said, we're not going to have another hearing until September. But then they keep putting out new video over the past few years. Like, oh my God, this is gold. So they're going to keep sharing information.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, he needs to take a cue from them, as does he and Merrick Garland must have a lot in common. And they just must sit around and think about what they're not going to do.
Although we know that there's a January 6th investigation in the Justice Department, and it's been going on since at least March. At least March, I think, is when we saw some stuff. So there's some movement there that we just are now hearing about. So they're not sitting doing nothing. They may end up doing nothing in the end, right? But at least there's an investigation.
Yeah, I believe when I see it. You know how they can be.
Yep.
But so many other, including, and I can share this. We had it was an interview. Tuesday, I was at the Jackie Robinson Museum opening. Attorney General Eric Holder was there. Actually, my son interviewed him for his journalism work this summer. But I talked to Attorney Holder, saying, man, what do you think? And he has said publicly he feels like there should be prosecution, which is unusual for him to even say. But he reiterated that to me, that there ought to be prosecution. And I even tested out my theory. I said, what do you think about this, man? What if we just did Al Capone and get what we can get? I said, what if Garland just did the mail fraud with the Stop the Steal fundraising, and he did which really might engender some support from his own base, because you're getting those people their money back. You're saying that he stole your money. And then the other issue being witness tampering. And Holder said, he said, yeah, Mark, I mean, you're right. Those are things, that can and should happen.
Yep.
So, Garland needs to, you begin to think whether Biden and Garland are cut from the same cloth. Biden's a very fortunate man. He could have gone, because, you and I didn't support him for vice president. And the reason being was because of some of his history, including, ladies and gentlemen, and it's polite, he's blessed, and it's polite, probably more blessed, that this does not come up every day. Supreme Court is hell. Isn't it interesting, though, that the movement has not said, well, you know what? One of the reasons Supreme Court is the way it is because of Joe Biden allowing Clarence Thomas to take his seat. I mean, he really ought to count his blessings. If I did that, you would never forget about it. But no one would be allowed to forget about it. But when we were talking years ago about his relationship with the Clarence Thomas confirmation, his role in it, even him running for president, the risk that just didn't get any traction. And he's fortunate it doesn't, because that is a part of, Clarence Thomas does not have to be on the Supreme Court. Democrats had power then. Democrats had the majority. Democrats, and I give this speech all the time, when's the last time the movement had some real victory? When we got sanctions against South Africa and overrode Reagan's veto, the movement did that. Number two, the movement stopped the confirmation of Robert Bork. We were able to do that in our lifetime. So those of us who are part of that know what it feels like and have experience getting that done. Now everything's changed. But Biden was around then. And Biden was there when Bork was stopped. He celebrated it like everybody else. Biden could have stopped Clarence Thomas. He on his own. No one wanted Clarence Thomas. Mm-hmm. But he on his own, decided, okay, well, I'm just going to let this go through. So what I've just said, folks, you're probably not going to hear anywhere else, because I guess it's impolite to say it. But that's what happened.
I would almost be okay with it if he had evolved with the times and realized that these institutions that he reveres and think have so much value and so much credibility, they're broken. Mitch McConnell broke them. And he really pretending that there's still status quo is actually feeding into the Republican strategy of destroying creating this nihilism towards politics.
Right.
And it makes nobody happy. This is the part in politics, if you're going to open your mouth, at least be trying to make somebody happy.
Right. They went from
It makes nobody happy.
Reagan preached no more big government, small government. They've gone from small government in Reagan to no government. They don't want it to function. That's denialism. They want to sabotage its actual function, and they've been successful at it. So, all right. Another Thursday Coast in the books. dailycoast.com. Check out The Beat wherever you get your podcasts. Check out Civics with a Q. Hear what people are talking about, what some of the trending conversations are and concerns and issues are for the American people. Thanks as always, Marcos.
Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.